Setting up your meeting on Facebook Live. Get so nervous every time.
Yeah.
Okay, we are live, but I'm going to let a few people jump on here before we get started.
I don't know if I should be up close.
It's all about good lighting.
Which I don't have enough of. Yeah. Okay.
All right, we have a few people on, so it's 9 o'clock. So we are going to get started. I like to be prompt. Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. Ghost Education 101. We have a great presentation tonight on how to conduct historical research, which we all need to know. If we're going to a property that's usually, I don't know if you're going to be doing residential with this, but mainly you really want to find out the background on some places before you go to them. So we're going to find out how to do it tonight. So this is Lisa Miller-Schnur. Thank you for coming tonight. As a former librarian, Lisa started the blog, The Haunted Librarian, and I'm going to let her tell us a little bit more about that. But Lisa has been a professional researcher for over 25 years, which that's amazing. And as a college professor, she's made many, many presentations on how to conduct research. She has appeared on several paranormal internet radio programs, including Scarefest Radio and Paranormal Filler. And she's also been a presenter and lecturer at many Paracons, and that's actually how we met. We met on a paranormal panel at Dragon Con, which is a big con here in Atlanta. Unfortunately, it was canceled this year. And she currently hosts the weekly internet radio show, The Haunted Librarian, on midnight.fm on Thursday nights at 9. Lisa also holds an MA in Library and Information Sciences, an MA in Professional Writing, and she just also happens to be an attorney. And you specialize in family law, correct?
Yes.
So as I told you, we only bring you the best here at Ghost Education with our brilliant educators. So could you tell us just a little bit about your Haunted Librarian website?
Definitely. So in 2012, 2013, I started writing blogs on the hauntedlibrarian.com, and it is a top 15 recognized paranormal blog, which I'm kind of proud of.
Yeah,
And it's interesting because I write about things that interest me. So sometimes it's newsworthy. Sometimes I get tired of doing the news. Sometimes I do TV shows. I'm tired of the TV shows now. And so I just, for instance, I wrote one of my more recent one is on the electroscope, which y'all had the presentation on non-technical tools. So I went and made my own. And so I wrote a blog about it. But and then the most recent one was from Alex, who was on my show last week, where we were talking about Leo Frank. And
that's a fascinating story, guys.
And I didn't realize about Lucille. And so I was watching Alex's YouTube channel and was just fascinated with the cemetery and that it's in Atlanta.
Yes.
I was like, oh, I've got to write about that. So I write about paranormal topics, and it runs the gamut. So in Halloween time, it's horror movies, and then just everything. And I research and hope to present the best information possible, and just kind of put out information people don't know that I'll see coming through my stream, my news feeds, and do a little bit more research and just write. So it kind of keeps me active in writing as well.
And your website is really beautifully laid out too. I mean, it's just so pretty. It's not like all scary, spooky, like some of them. It's just beautifully done. So I love it.
Thank you. I was trying to go for elegant. And
elegant.
Yeah, because I get tired of the scaring, and I want it to be so people don't think that it's just all ghost, because it's not all ghost. It's anything unknown. Yeah. So yeah, so I've been doing it 8 years, and it's a trademark site, so it's trademarked. And then I just love research. I've always been curious, is the polite word. I'm nosy, and I just love researching. So if you give me a topic, I'm like, I will go find something for you.
And then you did last night for me, because I love history, but I hate research. Oh my God. I just, if I hit a roadblock or a dead end, I was like, oh, I'm done. So
Yep.
yeah, you were helpful last night, because I didn't even think about name changes of people over the years. But anyway, so let's get into our presentation tonight. And if anyone has any questions, if you want to put them in the chat, and I will take note of those, and we'll go over those at the end.
Excellent. So I'm starting the show.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll be quiet.
No, thank you. And research takes time, right? And so it takes time and it takes patience, because you go down a lot of rabbit holes. And so your ways of researching changes depending on the topic. And so you can't have just one set rubric on how you research. Like you go from here to here, A to B to C. It depends on the topic. And so for purposes of this presentation, everything I'm going to show you, you can be completed online. So you can do it from the comfort of your couch. So you need some supplies, right? You need a notebook, pen, pencil, and a computer with an internet connection. And what I like to do is I get at the supply sales composition book. So after the back to school supplies kicks off, and then they start doing sales, I'll get these for like 10 cents, and I'll buy like 10 of them a year, so that I have all of my research for one topic contained in one book, because I'm constantly taking notes, so that I don't have to remember where I went for the research, because some of it is also you might have to go back and recreate your searches. So brainstorming where you're going to look for information. And there are some incredibly unique places that you might not think about in where to go for your information. So 30% I would say is from newspapers, 25% from databases, historic databases, or databases that contain older information. Property information, that's the property websites that you can go to find out, and real estate listings. Genealogy sources, I'm big on ancestry. 20% images, because looking at an image, an old picture, can also provide a lot of information for you. And then 5% is like miscellaneous, stuff I couldn't necessarily think of. So for this presentation, it's kind of like a hypothetical, where I looked at, or I was going to conduct research on the Kennesaw House. The Kennesaw House is in downtown Marietta. It is the building, the structure that houses the Marietta History Museum, and it's supposedly haunted, and it played a large role in the Civil War. And so I thought,
trying to get in there and trying to get in there.
I'm trying.
Not doing it.
Subject for a different day, because I'm trying, because I've got an idea, but I want to get in there. So this is hypothetically, we're going to do an investigation. So part of the team's going to research the building, right? And so we're going to start with researching the specific location. When you're researching the location, you need an address, right? As Philip and I were talking last night, yeah, we need the real address, not the mailing address. Oh, excuse me. Oh, that was funny. And so you need to gather your information. So you need the proper address. Also an unofficial address, because roads, the names of roads changed. And so, especially when you start getting into the rural areas, they might not have had a proper address. It might have just been the area or the unofficial name of the area, not an incorporated town. Any changes in the name of the address or numbering of the address. Nickname for the location, because a lot of properties like Kennesaw House, they get nicknames. And sometimes the nicknames change when ownership changes. So you have additional names the property went by, family names attached to the property, because back in olden days when the towns were small, they wouldn't refer to it as a street address. They didn't have street addresses. It was the family address of the property. Any structures on the property that were there or are there now, any maps or deeds, any information that you can gather ahead of time really can benefit and actually give you more time to look down other rabbit holes for information. So Google, right? And I say this kind of tongue in cheek. All of the great researching starts at Google. And it really does. A search engine. You go in and you type in the address and you see what comes back. Sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes somebody, like a family member runs a blog, might talk about the property, or you can see what the property's name change might have been, or spelling variations of a property and so forth. So Google is your first, it really is my first stop that I make in all my research. I go to Google. So most of us know how to use a search engine. So it kind of builds confidence so that you can get something that you want. But you do need to keep in mind that you need to vary your search terms. And so, for instance, Kennesaw House was known by a lot of different names, but I might not have known that at first. So I would put in Google Kennesaw House, and you're going to have to put Marietta, Georgia. And so the nice thing about Google is you can put in all of these words to limit the results you get, so that you get the better information. So if you can be incredibly specific in your search term, be incredibly specific, okay? But you also want to vary your terms. And so if you find out that the house went by another name, go back and do another Google search with that new name, because you can pull up old articles that way. Vary the type of content you want to find. And so I love Google Images. And so when I'm looking for images, I will filter and select images in my Google search so that I only get back old pictures. And Georgia actually has, there's an Georgia Encyclopedia. It's the history of Georgia in an encyclopedia format that's available online that has old pictures in it.
Oh,
and yeah, and there, I mean, postcards, old postcards. So for instance, if I'm looking for, because back in the day when you had these old historic buildings, there's postcards of them. And so I would type in Kennesaw House postcards and see what comes up, because inevitably somebody has been selling one on eBay, right? But realize these are rabbit holes. And so, man, you can go down the rabbit hole and just lose all kinds of track of time. And so you want to be aware of the time that you want to commit to your searches, because I can search for days. Like I can go into Ancestry and not come up for a day. And so you do want to be aware of it. Also know the limitations. Google doesn't have everything. Believe it or not, everything's not on the internet. So sometimes it might just give you an idea of where you can go get the information, but then you might have to actually go to a historical society or a public library, or you may actually be able to go to another database to be able to request the information. So here I've done a sample search where I've typed in Kennesaw House, Marietta, Georgia, and this is what it returned. And so over on the right-hand side, it gives me Marietta Museum of History. So I now know what it's officially called now. And it's actually the second floor is called that, not the first floor, but it tells you a description of it, 3-story building. It actually used to be 4 stories, and it gives me the address. So 1 Depot Street, Marietta, Georgia, 30060. And all of that information I'd write down, so I have it. Then the second, so the first selection that comes back is the actual website for the building. That's the most credible source, because they're going to tell you what they know about the building. Wikipedia is okay. I know some people like to go to Wikipedia. I don't like to go to Wikipedia. I try not to use Wikipedia. However, on your more obscure locations that might not have a lot of things written about it, Wikipedia might be the only place you can go. But I do try to avoid it. Then we've got Marietta.com did an article on the Kennesaw House, and then GeorgiaHauntedHouses.com did one, LastGasp.com did one. And so look at the results you get and look beyond that first page so that you can get more information. And when you find out, okay, John Glover built it in 1845, well, I can then do another search for John Glover 1845 rather, and pull up information about other buildings he might have built, because you don't know, maybe you're encountering the ghost of John Glover. I don't know, right? And so again, that's why the notebooks, I just constantly just take notes and write down names and dates and so forth. And be as specific as possible.
Yeah, because if you're doing like a spirit box and one of these names come through, you can look through your notes to see, oh, maybe this is the one.
Yeah.
And you can
right?
have other questions you can ask if you think that may be the person, if you've got your research.
Right. Or if you know what other buildings John Glover built, you can mention other buildings.
Yes.
Or
get him to mention them.
get him to mention them, or go and see if you can investigate those other buildings.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm always looking for another place. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say MariettaHistory.org is my first stop. Wikipedia, I just try to bypass. And then I would look at these other articles, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time in them, but I would skim them to see if they're going to provide me some more information. But also, I like to find when websites have wrong information, because it's kind of like a treasure hunt. Because when I find something that's incorrect, then I want to figure out what's the truth, because that's where some of the folklore comes around, is that somebody saw a website that said this name. It's not the right name because they didn't do their research, but then it just keeps, it continues on. And then we have a belief of this, this old haunting, and the person wasn't even the person's name.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of, if you're going to a pay for play haunted place, don't take what you've heard at face value. Do your own research. So many of these over the years have been, morphed into these horrific stories. I mean, I had read where like Waverly Sanatorium, 60,000 people have died there, and it's maybe like 6 or 16.
Mm-hmm.
That's it's still a lot of people, but it's not 60,000.
Exactly.
And Myrtle's Plantation. I mean, that story with, the oleander flowers and all that. I mean, there's absolutely no records of that. I mean, it's supposedly yellow fever is what killed them. So do your own research before you go to these places. That's just my personal opinion.
Oh no, I'm right there with you, because that's honestly why I don't watch a lot of the TV shows anymore, because I would watch the TV shows, get excited about this location and think, oh man, that's such a, beautiful story. I want to write about it. Then I'll start doing research and I'm like, man, that was total BS.
Exactly. Yeah.
And more often than not.
Haunted, it just may be that story has
mm-hmm.
Gone on so long, it just keeps getting embellished, to where it's something totally different than what's actually there.
Which is, a shame.
Yeah, it's sad. But it sells, and I understand it. It's marketing.
It is.
That's why I say do your own research before you go.
Especially because you don't know what might come through a spirit box for you. Right. Mm-hmm. Especially if it's a location where you've been to numerous times. And so you've kind of set up a rapport with the spirits, mm-hmm. and they might be wanting to share more information with you. So, and it's always exciting when they do that. And you're like, oh, I got it right here. I know it. So here's the official website for the, Kennesaw House, which is the Marietta Museum of History. And if you've never been, it is fabulous. You walk in on the first floor, you take the elevator up to the second floor, and that's where most of the museum is. And so here I would take notes, and you'll see it was a cotton warehouse, John Glover. I would write that down, 1845. I'd write that down. And then it actually changed ownership to Dix Fletcher. I'm not from Marietta. I'm not from Georgia. So I didn't know who Dix Fletcher was. And so I would write that down, because there's a name change. It became the Fletcher House Hotel. And what's what's interesting is when Sherman came through, they didn't burn down Marietta, the square of Marietta. What happened was when they were coming through the March to the Sea and the Confederate Army came through, their intent wasn't to burn down Marietta. What happened was it was a very windy night. And when they lit the fire, the ashes went everywhere. That's how come Marietta burned.
Oh, didn't know that.
Oops. Yeah. And so, but there's this urban legend around the Kennesaw House that it didn't burn because Dix Fletcher was a Mason and his son-in-law, Cole, was a Yankee spy. Well, I haven't found anything that supports that.
It's a great story, though.
It's a fabulous story, right? And it might be true, but that's not really why the Marietta Square burned. It burned because there was wind, and it kind of tells you that because the fourth floor burned because some ashes landed on it and it caught fire, and all of the buildings were built with wood, and so of course it lit up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but all of this I would be writing down because I am fascinated to know if he actually was a spy, right? But again, just collecting names, especially Dix, because DIX, that's a unique name, right? And so that's not something that would come across on a spirit box as being cycled through the vocabulary.
No.
So that would be like, bingo, right? But you wouldn't know until you do some research. So then you do a new search, right? And so I've got the address and now I want to do a property search, and property records are public record. And so that's why celebrities set up trust funds. They're also for other reasons, but then that way paparazzi, you can search property records. You can find all of that information. It's public record. Excuse me. So you're not intruding. None of the sites that I'm showing you are intruding on the privacy of an individual. So property records can really give you a lot of information. And so I just type in Cobb County property records, and it clicked on the first one there, Cobb County tax assessor, and it pulls up, these are the two windows. And so it pulls up where you can search by name in Cobb County, which is nice. Not all counties permit that. This is actually this website, or this database rather, is not maintained by Cobb County. It's a company, qpublic.net. And so when you start getting used to it, you'll see that some counties actually limit the information that you can get online. Now you can go to the building and all of that's available. Oh, so sometimes they prevent you, they're forcing you to make a trip is what they're doing. But Cobb County allows you to search by name, or you can search by address. And so I typed in 1 Depot Street and I pulled it up, and I can see that the museum, Marietta Museum of History, owns it. They don't pay property taxes because it's a museum owned by the city and so forth. The limitation is no one paid for these databases when they started coming around. No one paid for them to go backwards and put in historical documents. They just started up with the database and moved forward. And so unless it's a property that's been, I think it's 1970s, I think is the as far back as I've seen where it has gone back, and it might be because there was some title search done or something. So sometimes I can see a property back to then, but for the most part, if you want to look at something property records, you're going to have to go to the property records office.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah. So for instance, your property last night, 1913, I can't find a sales record for it in a property database. I can find it somewhere else though.
Yeah, at a physical building. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, or there's another database. Ooh, yeah, right. I know, intrigue. But so you can find out all kinds of information. And how this is good for you is if you're going to a private residence and the client who has contacted you is leasing. Good point. Yeah. So, you know, you're allowed on the property because a landlord tenant, the owner of the property can't ban you from the property kind of thing. But you do want to be careful in what you release about the property if that's not the owner of the property.
Oh, that's a good liability tip.
Yeah, it could be, right? Especially, if you're claiming it's haunted, like Kennesaw House is supposedly has haunted by 1,000 ghosts, then you might want to be a little bit careful about that.
Yeah.
So then the next place, I know you're just like, no, we're going down another rabbit hole. But this is probably one of the most undervalued or underappreciated sources. All of you in Georgia. So if any of you are watching this from Georgia, you have access to databases through your public library. Most states have a similar model. And so all you need to do is contact your public library, either by going to their website or visiting them and asking them how you get access to the databases from home. How this came about was in the state of Georgia. Georgia has a lot of rural areas, and the disparity in education is very marked when you start going into rural Georgia. They're poor counties. They don't have money for public libraries. They don't have money to purchase subscriptions to these databases. And so what the Georgia legislature did was they enacted funding for databases, and it's called Galileo in Georgia. It's the Georgia's virtual library, an initiative of the University System of Georgia. It's an acronym. Galileo is all you need to know. And you just need to ask them what's the Galileo password. It changes every semester. Or there's an authentication process that you do. And so they have different database subscriptions depending on the type of library you're affiliated with. So at K through 12, if any of you are a K through 12 teacher and have access to Galileo, your databases are going to be different than the public library databases, because the K through 12, they have more kindergarten, first grade friendly, a lot of pictures, little words, and so forth. Public libraries has a lot more in terms of genealogy, because that's where the interest is. And then colleges and universities also have more academic databases, but there are hundreds of databases available. And most of them, a growing number of them, are full text and provide you the information right from your computer.
That's nice.
You need a public library card. So here's my little plug. Get your public library card. It's the cost of admission, right? Free. And you just get the password. And so mine is through Kennesaw State University. And so when I go into Galileo, I just authenticate myself with my email and my password, and it logs me in. And so I can get into the databases. And you're like, well, why would I want to use some databases? Well, here's the portal for Kennesaw, and the lower right-hand corner here is the library, online library, where I would type in Kennesaw House, or I could write in Dix Fletcher, because included in these databases are newspapers.
Oh,
that's how you can get older articles.
Yes.
Yeah, right? I know. It's just, and once you start learning the databases and which databases contain what the information you're looking for, you can find out so much more. And it's worth noting that these are not Georgia specific databases. So I can get into a database if I'm from Florida. So if I want to do some, if we ever get to travel again and I go back to St. Pete and I'm going to go and look at some haunted locations, I want some background information. It's not Georgia specific. It has newspapers from Florida in there. It has international papers. It has papers in different languages. So if you speak a different language and you want to stay up with your French, you can read French. So
I wouldn't have thought of that. So that's really good to know. I would have thought it would have been specific to the area. So that's really good to know.
Because you think that it would be proprietary, but it's not. Mm-hmm. And so I just, put in my search, and you'll see here I put in Kennesaw House. Up in the upper left-hand corner, I've circled where it gives me over 46,000 returns. That's like weeks worth of searching. Yeah. That's too much. So one tip I recommend is that you put Kennesaw House in quotation marks because it treats it as a phrase, because we're looking for the phrase of the building known as Kennesaw House, quotation marks.
Oh,
When you're searching Google, Google already has that pre-programmed into its algorithm. So Google presumes that if you're putting two words together in your Google search, you mean them as a phrase. So you don't need the quotation marks. But if your phrase is 3 or more words, put the quotation marks in and it gets rid of all that other stuff. But it's a huge jump, right? It goes down to 167. That's huge. That I've got time to look at.
yeah, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm. And so you can, it's got a picture of the historical marker. So I don't even need to go see the historical marker. And those are those big signs that the
Yeah.
history puts out. And they've got a lot of narrative there, right? And Kennesaw House, if Kennesaw House is on the National Registry of Historic Places, you can actually find the documentation that they submitted to receive that accommodation, and it'll be in Galileo in a database. And so you can read through. I've gone through a lot of those types of documents because in order to become a National Historic Property, they have to give a timeline of any significant,
Oh, wow.
right? So you can
Yeah.
ownership
That's
changes.
amazing.
I know if they've done any construction, remodeling, all of that's in there. It tells you, it'll tell you the materials used to build the building.
Wow.
So, your funky materials that set off ley lines
Mhm.
and all of that has it right in there. And so you can look it all up. So that's an image. And then you also get, other articles, right? This is about parking decks in Marietta. Not, then you just, keep
Could be
scrolling.
haunted, but probably not.
It could be. I mean, it's like bad 70s, but yeah, I don't know. But they're real. It's just, I love researching. Can't you tell?
It shows. And it reminds me so
Well,
much of math, and I hate doing math. So I'm
oh,
glad there are people like you that absolutely love doing this.
I know, right? Because I will answer your call or your text at 11 p.m.
What you did. Thank you very much.
No, I love it because again, I'm nosy, right? And I'm up. So here's the record for the historical marker. And so tells you who put in the information. It gives you different search terms. So if you wanted to look up more historical markers in Cobb County, you can look those up. It gives you the full text. So I don't even need to go see it, which is
And
sad. You
this
should.
information, they have done the homework. So to get that certification, this is the real deal here. This is what
Yep.
really happened.
Yep. Many eyes.
That's what's so exciting about it. They've done all the hard work.
They really have. So it frees you up to do even more work, that you're not just having to do the basics, that you can go above and beyond in the same amount of time because now you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, I would just, take notes. And so it tells you it's a photograph, it's a still image, gives you how to access it, and then tells you copyrights. David Siebert took the picture. That's for commercial reproduction. And I just want to touch upon that for a minute because copyright laws, right? Copyright laws. So what I cannot do is I cannot write a book, ebook or a print book with David's picture in it without paying him or getting his permission. However, if I'm writing a blog, I don't receive money from my blog. I can post it because it's for educational purposes. There's different exceptions in the copyright rule or copyright law. And generally what I tell my students is if you're receiving payment for it, then you need to pay to use it. If you're not receiving payment and it's for educational purposes, then you can use it. But I would give David photo credit.
Yeah.
That's
being nice. That's professional to do that.
Well, it's professional, but also so many people I'll talk to have researched a location and they have a lot of good stories, right? They have a lot of content. They've done, maybe a year's worth of investigations there. And they're like, yeah, but we don't have any like real pictures, like good pictures. We only have our investigation pictures, and it's like, contact David, right? They licensing to put in the book is not that expensive. It's like I looked at like $25.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. It's not a lot of money because it gets their name out there, or it can. I mean, you can work, negotiate, and so forth. So it gives you a resource if you don't know a professional photographer, which is good.
Hmm.
So then, okay, I'm there and I'm moving forward. So one thing that the Kennesaw House has, one reason why it's in infamy in history is that it is where Andrew's Raiders stayed the night before they decided to steal the general, the locomotive, the
Yes.
big train engine. And so I would do another search for the Great Locomotive and Great Locomotive Chase. There's one movie that was made from it, a Disney movie. You can get more information about it in terms of searching and stuff. But you'd want to do some research on that, because for the longest time, an old piece of a train, I can't remember if it was the engine or not, actually sat outside the Kennesaw House on the side of the on the sidewalk down a little bit. The city made the owner move it finally, but there used to be this train sitting out there. So that might be a trigger object, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Especially, yeah, because in one of the rooms inside the museum is set up, it's Andrew's Raiders. It's set up like his room, because it was a hotel. It looks like how his hotel might have looked looking out over the train tracks. So I do some research on the Great Locomotive Chase.
You could use the train sounds, recorded train sounds as trigger objects too. We use
Oh
music,
yeah.
we use music all the time, and so why not train sounds?
Or because that crossing there, they're silent now. I think the horns don't go off, but they do
Oh,
go
yeah.
off late at night. But the trains go by all the time, so you might want to wait
So,
until the train, because it rattles, right, and
and,
vibrates the building.
and also, what do trains do? Create kinetic energy. So
Yeah,
got a double dose there.
it's just yeah, it's a pretty cool building, by the way. But I got a plan. So so you would read up, and James Andrews, their story did not end well. They were captured and not living.
Yeah.
And so but Big Shanty's Lacey Hotel. So some of you don't know that Kennesaw, the town of Kennesaw, actually that's not its original name. It used to be called Big Shanty. And so the hotel, the Lacey Hotel up there, which is they've got a marker there as well. You might want to talk about, Big Shanty, or if Big Shanty comes up on your box, Shanty, it's not the drink, it's the town maybe. That's also just a little bit more research that you might want to do, right? Yeah, they were hanged. So like Oakland Cemetery. I mean, these are all words that might come up.
Sure. Absolutely.
So you can actually access the Atlanta Journal-Constitution newspapers, and you can do it either through databases, or if you don't know the database that the newspaper's in, you can actually type in the background is Kennesaw State, right? The interface, but your interface is going to be the public library you went in through. So don't worry about it not having that gold, black and gold, that's KSU's colors. It through your public library, it's just going to be their interface in the background. But you can search by journal title. And so journal means newspaper, magazine, serial, anything that comes out on a regular basis. Or actually, sometimes it's an irregular basis, but it's not a book. That's a serial, that's a journal.
Okay.
And so we have to remember, and again, I'm not from Atlanta. So when I first moved here, there was the Journal, the Atlanta Journal, and then there was the Constitution. And then they merged because newspaper readership's down, and it became the Atlanta Journal Constitution. So you need to know that, so that you do a search for older editions with the proper name. Your smaller town newspapers aren't going to be in this database. That's one of the drawbacks to this database. So for instance, the Marietta Daily Journal, not in here. Small newspapers, for instance, from Florida. And so the News Press, which is Fort Myers News Press, is the local newspaper where I'm from, won't be in here. Okay. But I got another database for it. It's just another place to go. And so this will tell you, you type it in and it will tell you online access, if it's paper, if it's where you can have access for it. And so here's online access. I just click into it and it will take me to a database that actually has the online access, but it's not going back to the 1800s this way. So you either need access through another database or you need access by going to the public library and looking at the microfilm. But I did find some older articles, not all of the papers in here, but some of them are. And so this is just a horrible scan job where I went to ProQuest, which is a very large generalist database. It has newspapers and magazines. So like People magazine would be in ProQuest, very large database. Most of what's in it is in full text. So you don't need to go elsewhere. It'll pull it up. And a lot of it is scanned in. So you can see here, somebody scanned in this article from 1869. That's old.
Wow. Yeah.
I know, right? And it's just talking about the Kennesaw House at Marietta, notwithstanding the winter season has set in, the Kennesaw House at Marietta, under admirable management of those excellent caterers, Fletcher and Frayer. So Fletcher, his wife, they went into a catering business, still draws large customers, I think. The up night train on the state road stops for supper there. It is a positive pleasure to take a meal at this hotel, equal to any in the state and surpassing the most of them. I mean, that's just
Didn't
cool.
even know that about the Kennesaw House.
Yeah, right. So yeah, and so some of it is scanned in. I always like to create a timeline when I'm doing research so that I can see when properties change hands or when properties change names, because sometimes they'll refer to something. So for instance, I wrote a blog on Lucille Frank's unmarked grave at Oakland Cemetery because Alex Matsuo, I have trouble with her name. She was a guest on my show last week and we were talking about it, and I watched her YouTube visit to Oakland and just deeply moved with it. And so when I was doing research, Leo Frank was the Jewish man who was charged in the murder of 13-year-old Mary Fagan, and he was sentenced to death. But on one of the last days of John Slayton's governorship in Georgia, he commuted the sentence to life, which made people mad. And so they went and they kidnapped him from jail.
Yep.
And it was really important for me to get the name of the jail correctly, because jails, penitentiary, they change names. And it was the jail in Milledgeville. And so when I do the timeline, I could see when it changed names so that I actually got the correct name of it. It was these Georgia State Prison Farm at Milledgeville was the name at that time. But it's important for me to do that. So that's why I do timelines. And so here's an old article from 1974, which is a little dated, but it's okay. Where I can pull up some information where it was getting changes of ownership and everything. And then I create my timeline. And so here I just made it fancy for you so you could see. And then here, so this is an article from 1979, and you can see how the Kennesaw House looked in 1867. They had photography back then. And then how
the Civil War ended in 1865. So that's what, that's the time period we're talking about.
Yeah, which might which might have people attached to it because of how the activity that went on downtown in
Yeah,
Marietta.
exactly.
And then you can see what it looked like today, meaning 1979. And it looks different today, 2020.
Mhm.
My favorite database is ancestry.com. And so I'm going to talk more about searching it for people. But one of the features that Ancestry, one of their, how they've made their subscription more robust is they actually include newspapers.com in the subscription. Newspapers.com has those small town newspapers, and they go back
Oh,
to the start of these old town papers, which is fantastic.
that's fabulous.
It is amazing. And kind of like to put this in perspective. So I grew up in Fort Myers in Florida, and Fort Myers was like this shanty beach town. Like through 1900s, Thomas Edison had his summer lab there and so forth, but it really was just like kind of like this place that the wealthy went to and wintered there. And then it kind of came into its own in the 1960s. That's when it had this huge boost in development. And so my parents, my dad, let me go back. Yeah, and my mom and dad. My dad was the developer down in Fort Myers. He developed Cape Coral, and so I'm stuck on his father's line in my family tree. And so what I did was I went into newspapers.com and I found every newspaper article my dad's ever mentioned in,
Wow. That's
which is just amazing because I lost him when I lost him 15 years ago. And so when I was, well, I'm not gonna say how, but it's been a little bit, it's been a minute. And so I could actually kind of connect with him. We have his ashes. And so, I can connect with him and see everything that he did and see that. And also back in the day, obituaries were a big thing. And they were elaborate and they listed everybody in the family. And so newspapers.com is fabulous for not just doing people, which I'm going to show you, but buildings. And so like when management changed his hands on a building, or if the structure gets relocated, that happens a lot, right?
Yep.
Historic structure. People buy the land, they don't want the old building, and so they give it to the historic society. That's how we've got the Root Museum in downtown Marietta. I think that's its third location, because people kept buying the land it was on and saying, okay, here's a house. So you go in and you do the same thing. I use the quotation marks around Kennesaw House. I put Marietta, and then I wanted to know if it was haunted. Because back in the day, newspapers wrote about that.
Oh, sure.
And it's so cool to read their stories about supposed hauntings or strange things that happened at these locations, because they were very candid and very much, they reported it.
Well, spiritualism, when you think what was the early 1900s, late 1800s, spiritual,
Yep.
and that was kind of like just a way of life for a lot of people.
Up into the 1920s.
Yeah, so it wasn't so taboo as it is today for a lot of people.
Not at all. In fact, so I do a lot of research on Mothman, and so yeah, I'm just so nosy. And so Mothman, late 1960s, right? And 1966, what else was going on in the world? The Vietnam War. Incredibly depressing. People wanted to read about something that was not the war. And so the Mothman, Mary Hyre, her articles got picked up and ran in papers all over the United States about Mothman, right? And they didn't bat an eye about publishing it. So I didn't really find anything though when I did that. Is it haunted? Which that actually that happens, right? Not everything is going to be exactly how you want it to be, or return how you want it to be. Let me just move that. But it's there. So supposedly the Kennesaw House is the house of 1,000 ghosts. And this is actually a relatively new tag for it. This is not steeped in any type of urban legend or folklore. It actually, a psychic did a visit at Kennesaw House, and they and it's on YouTube. And so YouTube actually has a lot of information that is beneficial, and we don't look at it because we think of YouTube as being kind of like early days of TikTok maybe,
Yeah.
and we discount it. But people go and do investigations, so you can look it up and see. Personal blogs, definitely you can, and you can see when you read a blog if the person is using proper punctuation, if they can spell correctly, if they tell you where their sources are, then that might be a good blog. Not every blog out there is good though, I'll say that. And then interviews. This is either doing personal interviews face to face or via email, or looking at old footage of interviews, because just like newspapers covered stories, so did the TV stations. Remember, 6 o'clock news used to be a big deal, and they would send people out there and do the interviews. And looking at that old footage, again, a lot of archives are digitizing their old photographs and their video, or their film, and putting it on YouTube. But you don't think of YouTube as going as a source for it. Now we've got people. So we did the location, and we now we're going to look at people. And I didn't want to do a search for any of the people related to Kennesaw House. So and it's just because I don't know that much about them to be able to see if the information's correct. So I didn't want to get down that rabbit hole. So what I'm going to show you is information on research that I've done with my family tree. And so ancestry.com, it's incredibly popular. Over the 20 years that I've used it, like it came out like in 1999, it has added so much. Like I've got a notebook. I found a notebook when I was moving some stuff of the old returns that it would give you. And it's just night and day. So if you haven't been in Ancestry recently, I mean, give it a try. It's incredibly popular. A lot of people put a lot of information up there. It includes not only the tree information or census information, property records. It has wills in there. It's got all kinds of information that you wouldn't think of that can verify information for you. But it also has photographs, newspaper articles, family stories.
I found out through there that I have a family cemetery in the mountains of North Carolina. I had no clue about that. And it had a picture of a monument of an ancestor that died at the Hindenburg. And I got all excited and thought, oh, wow, in the Hindenburg. But actually, it was a battle, Hindenburg battle in France in World War I. But
That's
I
still
had
kind of exciting.
no idea about that. And I found all that there.
That is, it's amazing. So I found out I have a cousin who died on the Titanic.
Oh, wow.
I know. And then my dad's mother's family, they were early settlers of West Virginia. And so there's a family cemetery there. And then, you know, you find all this information. And then when you actually go and visit, it's just more meaningful, you know, and also it kind of helps you figure out what you want to capture in terms of photographing things too. Kind of helps make you make a plan.
Yes.
But again, Ancestry, rabbit holes. I could search for days. In fact, I try not to search all the time. Like I'll go, like I've gone for like 5 months right now where I haven't gone into the database much and done anything around there, because you really do have to be in a frame of mind.
Yes.
And you need, binders.
Whoa.
This
Yeah.
is just my dad's side.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and this is binder 1. So I have binder 2. And so yeah, you do. And this isn't printouts. This is my notes and just writing down stuff and filling stuff in. And again, it doesn't contain everything because again, you know, it is a subscription service. I'm sure there's an algorithm that prevents you from seeing all the records, because sometimes I'll be in there and I'll get leaf hints like automatically. And then other times I'll go in and I'll be like, I know there's an obit out there. Why aren't I getting the hint? Okay. So, you know, but it's awesome. So here's my tree. And when you go in, you can't, the commercials kind of set it up where you can go in and you can type a name and all magically your whole family appears. That's not how it works.
Yeah, no.
You have to actually go in and link yourself to people. And so the more information you know about your family, the better. And so I actually set up trees when we were doing investigations. I would set up trees of different investigations that I have, so I could have a database of names. And so, you know, like I have my name, my husband's name, and then it has my parents. My mom's still living, my dad's deceased. And then it has the little green leaves where those are the hints, and you have to go in. And that's why you need the binder, because you got to write everything down, because more often than not, I've found that some people go in and they just, because it's in the database, they just take it as the gospel. It's the truth. And so the dates are this way, and that's not how it is. Okay.
That's good to know.
Yeah, so you do have to go in and verify, and that's why I have the notebook where I keep track of everything so I can see, especially because my mom's name's Agnes, and if you see, her mom was named Agnes, and her mom was named Agnes, and then her mom was named Agnes. Like my mom is like 7th generation direct Agnes, and she grew up in Pennsylvania. My dad's family's West Virginia, and would you believe there's Agneses on that side? Oh my God. Thankfully she didn't name me Agnes. Yeah. So, but you know, but so you have to be able to keep track. And, you know, especially older families, you know, when they had a lot of children, if they had a child die at birth or shortly after, they would name another boy that name.
Yes.
And so you have to know that as well. And so, yeah. Yeah, the Funk family. I have Mennonites in my family. But who knew until you do all the research? It's kind of cool. Find a grave.
Oh, yeah.
Free service. Find a Grave is fantastic. And Find a Grave started out being celebrities so that you could go tour celebrity graves. And then they slowly started expanding everybody else, right? They include, not only do they include grave sites, but they also include if you were buried at sea or lost at sea, or if you're cremated. And that information, we have more people being cremated now, so you don't have a grave site to go to, but you can find that information. You can search by name. You have to have at least a last name to do a search. It's constantly updated. There are people all over the world adding information who go out to the cemeteries and take pictures. So if you want to see the dates, if you're looking for a date alignment of birth and death or inscriptions, okay, they'll have that in there. If you don't have a photograph of the tombstone, you can actually request photos and they'll go out. And if they didn't, yeah, so you can do requests, and there's volunteers who go in and get the request, or sometimes because I'm registered in there, and sometimes I'll go and I can't find it. And so then you put in a note saying, looked everywhere, it's not there. And so it might be an unmarked grave. And again, it's also rabbit holes. One thing I would say about Find a Grave is the inscriptions on tombstones sometimes aren't legible, right? Exactly. Or they put in a nickname. instead of the official name, or the birth name, proper name. And so you have to play around with it a little bit. Sometimes it might only be their initials, right? Because they're paying by letter.
Oh yeah.
And so they're not going to put, a lot of times that's why you don't have the birth date, is because, you know, it costs more. And so if you're having trouble finding somebody, I would search by cemetery and then variations. So for instance, my paternal grandmother's name, family name's Kessler, which had 2 S's, but now it has 1 S. So you're just trying variations. Also, it's a suggestion of where the cemetery might be, but again, it's whatever they called that area back in the day. They also have private cemeteries, cemeteries that might have been on a farm that you wouldn't know about, or unmarked graves are also listed in there. It's pretty cool. So get the most out of Ancestry. Ancestry links to Find a Grave, so you don't have to actually do a separate search and find a grave. But sometimes I'll do the search and find a grave and then figure out what the name is on the tombstone and then go back into Ancestry, type it in, and then it will find it. But learn the tricks, right? Search it often. Know that you're going to spend a lot of time just kind of, as with any database, getting to know it, see what type of information it's contained in there. Sometimes the information's incorrect, especially if it's being digitized. Cursive. People have a hard time reading cursive these days.
Yes.
And it's sad. That's why it should be taught, is because all of our records are in cursive. All the European records are in cursive. And so you'll see, like, I can go in and Ancestry just did a match on my father when he was an infant. So 1930 census, where it has my grandfather, who was a professional musician, and my grandmother living in Queens. But instead of them reading the name as Miller, it read it as Kneeler, Nieler.
Oh.
Right. So sometimes it catches it, sometimes it doesn't. So you can enlarge the documents too to see them. But you just have to mix it up. So yeah. Oh, I have these out of place. Sorry. So here's some tips on Find a Grave. Here's the screenshot for it. It's just fabulous. It has so much in here, and people are actually adding life stories in Find a Grave.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So you can go in and search, and it will give the life story. It'll give links to other family members, so that then you can hop around and read if they have family stories there. You can see pictures. They're uploading pictures. It really has a lot of information that I think that people kind of overlook. Here's my big image slide that I didn't take out. But yeah, and this was I don't, we've gone the hour, but this is just the start of it. When you start researching, there's so many places you can go, and you just do a little bit at a time so that you're not under that crunch, so that you can go back. And then after, whenever we would do an investigation and I would get information like names or keywords, then I would go back and research afterwards to see if I can find something, because sometimes it might be a nickname, or you just never know. All those words might mean something, but unless you do the research up front, and it doesn't have to be everybody, right? Because you do want to not try and, have a preconceived idea of what the box should be saying to you. But somebody on the team should do some pre-research to be able to verify or to mark off, and, kind of as when you get together afterwards, as a, hey, we need to return to this.
Could you stop your screen sharing? I've got a remark from somebody in the chat.
Stop sharing.
Bottom under screen. Yeah, there we go. Someone asked about military records for like finding a soldier. Are military records public?
Yeah. They are.
Yeah.
And in fact, so I have found all the way up to World War II. No, I have found Korean War.
Oh, okay.
I have found my uncle for Korean War. That's the most recent. I have gone back, and so I can take my mom's, not my mom's, I can take my father's mother's side all the way back to the Revolutionary War.
Oh, that's a long time ago.
And I can see the military records and ancestry.
Okay.
I can see Civil War pensions. That's in there as well.
In ancestry.
In ancestry. And then if you can't find somebody, then, so for instance, my dad's name's Joe Miller, and I mean, generic, right?
Yeah.
And so my grandfather and my great grandfather both enlisted in World War II in the Army as one's as a musician, and then they were just taking people. And so my great grandfather enlisted. Well, I couldn't find that much information on my grandfather. And so I actually went online for the Army records, and you can submit, and I think it's like $25, and you can get military records. Yeah.
Is that, how much can you get for the 25? Is there a,
whatever they have in the file?
Okay, so whatever it is. Another website that I found, I think, wasn't one of our presentations at Dragon Con on historical research or researching something. It was something to do with research.
Yeah.
And I found a site called diedinmyhouse.com. It's a pay site, but you can put in your address and find out if there were any police reports taken about someone who died at that property. It will be listed, but only if it was like official and report made through the police department. It'll also show if there's been any drug arrests or anything illegal that has gone on at that address. So that's another interesting one.
It is. And so sometimes people shy away from the subscription databases because you're already doing it for free. And so, ancestry cost, I think, I forget how much it costs, like $100 a year. It's come down, like when they get you and then you say no, and then they come up with a better price. But I have gotten my money's worth out of it. And so, but if you don't want to do Died in My House, a lot of times the old papers, the newspapers ran the stories.
Yeah. And you can get those through those databases through the library.
Yep.
Which would probably have more information than, say, a police report would, because the reporter is going to get the juicy tidbits that, is going to sell a story, so to speak.
Oh, definitely. So I have an aunt named Agnes. Surprise.
Imagine.
I know, right? And she was elderly and she was murdered. And it's an unsolved murder. And so, let me tell you, when I found that out, I was scouring all the newspapers and trying to find information and so forth about that. I did get a lot of information. Unfortunately, they never, they arrested somebody, but that person didn't do it. Oh. And but you can, it's just family histories that my mom didn't know anything about.
Yeah.
So.
What about like Zillow.com or Trulia? Some of those things I've looked up for properties, so I can get the, you can do a sky view or a street view. I've done that a few times just to get a lay of the land before I go to a location.
Definitely. And so like your property that you messaged me about, I went into, I Googled it, the address, and it pulls up Zillow and Redfin and Realtor. And I looked at those. And that's where I saw that it was a modern home.
Yes.
It was like modern home.
Nope.
But then what I did was I went into the property page because I knew the name of the owner, did a search on the property page for the last name of the owner, where I found the other property he's bought, could click on the map. And then I went to Zillow and actually I went to Google satellite and pulled it up and just looked for the house.
Yeah. Whew, I'm glad you like doing this stuff.
Oh my God, I love doing this. Oh, so wish I could get paid for it.
One investigation we did about 2 years ago, the house was on an actual Civil War battle site. This was up in Ackworth.
Yeah.
Um, the family had moved the house. They owned this property. The house was elsewhere. They were putting in a new road. They moved the house there years and years and years ago. So I knew the name of the battle, so I looked up the battle, and then I went to the generals that were there at the battle and looked up that. I mean, they took immaculate, beautifully written notes. I mean, the way these people spoke were amazing. So I knew that on that property, of course, there were 17 Union soldiers died, and it said they were buried as they lay. So that told me they're in the yard, basically.
They are.
I mean, the house was nuts activity-wise, but that was fun research. But that's as much as I wanted to do.
Yeah, it's sad because the Confederate soldiers actually, because they were traitors to the United States,
Yes.
the United States government would not pay for them to be buried. And so for their bodies to be reclaimed, the mothers, daughters, sisters, wives went out and collected the bodies and buried them. And so a lot of Confederate soldiers were never buried. Well, they're buried, but they're not in cemeteries.
It was Calhoun, not Ackworth.
Calhoun.
Yes.
Yeah.
Calhoun.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That the notes for the Union soldiers were amazing. Could hardly find anything from the Confederates that died at that battle. It was very interesting, the difference in the two. But
Well,
thank you so much for the presentation.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It was amazing.
Thank you.
Amazing.
I love researching.
And I'm glad you do, because I'm going to keep texting you addresses when I need to.
Philip, I love it. I love it. So don't, yeah.
I just leave the talking to the dead people to me. I'll do that all day and night, but research, oh, yeah. That's too much work for me. Even though I love history, all that digging, I just like, I get so distracted because of those rabbit holes that I lose track of what I'm looking for.
And that's why, having the people have the different roles and everything. And so then it's kind of like when you make the connections, like when they're talking to you and you get some imagery.
Yes.
And some words, and then you say something that I've researched, and those connect. I'm like getting goosebumps because that's what's overlooked or minimized in the paranormal field is the validation, the cross validation that we get in these investigations.
Like I had gotten female EVPs at this location at this Civil War site, and I'm like, why am I getting female EVPs? And so I had researched. I knew they had something called camp followers, and those were women who were destitute, and they would follow the men and do favors for food, protection. I mean,
Survival.
It's hard times. So I had quite a few women saying hello, on EVPs out in the woods. And I was like, what? And it's like, oh, there were women here. And of course, the scurvy and all the horrible diseases that were going, they were dying too, along with the soldiers. So, I mean, I wouldn't have known why I had female voices if I hadn't found that in the research.
Well, the mills still worked during the Civil War. So you had females and children working in the mills.
Yeah.
And, because, life still had to go on. And wow, that's sad. Yeah. But I can see how that would happen.
Hard times.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just want to thank everybody for watching and sharing tonight and supporting us. And we hope you're enjoying all of our live streams. We want to do things that we think will help you in your paranormal endeavors and make you better in what you do. And our next presentation is October 7, and it is on poltergeist. And it is everything you always wanted to know about poltergeist. And it's going to be really, really good. So we want you to join us. And I learned a lot doing the research on this project. I mean, it was fascinating. So you're going to enjoy that. So be sure, 2 weeks, October 7th. That's a Wednesday. It's not a Tuesday. It's a Wednesday night. So thank you. And we're going to end now. Say goodnight to everybody. And if you have any additional questions, just put them in the chat. We'll reread those. But I think I got all those. Someone had mentioned ancestry, but then you covered that. So anyway, thank you, Lisa. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
And you're going to help me with the poltergeist presentation too.
I am. I am. Yeah, poltergeist. We had one.
Oh, really?
And when we were living in Reno, Nevada.
Okay, we'll get into that. We'll save that for next time.
Okay.
All right. Good night, everybody. Thank
Night.
you.